This is the, umbrella planning session for Cephadm/orchestration. So we have just a set of topics on here we're going to go through. I'm pretty sure these are all written by 3 people. Yeah, because I think I only had this last one actually, and then I think these are from Redwan and these are from John Mulligan and Green, who are all here. So I might be passing off to them for introducing some of the topics. So we'll start from the top. So the PyO3 resilience thing, I'll give a bit of context in this before we get there, before I give it off to John. So this problem started with, I believe, it was like some Rust package in, where is it? What's the thing called?
Cryptography.
Yeah. You can't load it in twice, but the way that the Ceph manager module works with, or manager modules work with the sub-interpreters and all that, it will try to load it in multiple times. What would end up happening is that only one module would get K8 events, or not K8 events, get whatever use this cryptography library. And all the other modules would fail to load. So actually, depending on the order it loaded in, which we found varied on different file systems, certain modules would fail to start up. In certain cases, it would be Cephadm. In certain cases, it would be one of these Rooker K8 modules. So John started some work to at least refactor it in a way where Cephadm could call into it in a different fashion that didn't have to import it the same way, where we didn't run into this problem. And so we're sort of looking to finish up that work because that was only a partial solution as far as I know. Yeah, I'll get over to John to explain the rest of that one.
Yeah, and I should also mention that I want to give credit to the original person who had started this. Of course, suddenly I'm blanking on his name, but anyway, I kind of took over and polished up some work that had been started by someone other than myself. Long story short, what we did was we made the dashboard and Cephadm compatible by basically taking the few uses of cryptography that the dashboard had and kind of plumbing them through a different layer so it's not being done in process. And because of the work is the import is not being done in the same process, the import mechanism doesn't run afoul of this rule. And there's a whole bunch of layers involved, and I'm not going to dominate this meeting with this one topic. So just be aware that the cryptography library, because it uses Rust, uses this PyO3, blah, 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 blah. So we made Cephadm and the dashboard basically work, but there are 2 modules that still directly use this cryptography library. And as Adam mentioned, you don't always hit this problem because the order that the modules get loaded matter, and that order is basically up to whatever your file system gives the manager. We had brought this up in the CSC back in spring to try and get some more information to determine if the K8s events module is used at all. Unfortunately, we didn't really follow up on that much, so we don't really know if it's something we can just remove. But regardless, we have to do something about this at some point. And so I added this topic to the discussion agenda. So I think we had talked about either modernizing some of the code inside of the Rook module. But I don't remember. It's been long enough that I don't remember. But this is kind of like, is this something we should work on? I think it is, because I think it's something that's going to bite us again in the future. The other thought I've had is refactoring how modules get loaded in the manager. That's even more complex, but it might be a better underlying fundamental thing. It kind of moves the work out of the orchestration space. It kind of depends on where you think the manager lies in the constellation of Ceph subprojects. But yeah, any thoughts, any comments? I'm kind of burned enough verbiage on this.
I tried a little bit. I think so. The person you took over, I think, was P. Castro, right? I think you mentioned.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, at least the GitHub username. I don't know the real name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember is the Rook module. We were having a hard time taking imports out of that. I think it was the Kubernetes package itself ended up using it.
Right. So because it's not something, I mean, I think the module uses it directly, but you're right. I believe it also uses it indirectly through Kubernetes libraries, which is a problem.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it
it's
was
kind of impossible.
dependency of Kubernetes also.
Can you repeat that, Redo? I got you off of it.
Yeah, it was a dependency of the Kubernetes module in Python. So it was not direct dependency, but indirect in the case of Rook.
Yeah, I think now that we're talking about it, I think one of the suggestions we had was somehow trying to monkey patch the library, at least make it lazy loaded. I don't know how much work that is.
Yeah, there was we had a whole Etherpad about this actually. I wish I had that linked somewhere.
Yeah, you're right. When I made these notes, yeah.
I wonder if I can find that.
Anyway, I don't want to necessarily burn a lot of time on this. I just does the community, do we think it's worth spending time on this?
To give some context on the Cephadm side is why it hasn't been a huge issue for us yet is because we are still doing containers based off of CentOS 9. It doesn't have the package like version high enough that you hit this, but we are going to eventually want to move to newer distros as a container base. And I think when we do, this might suddenly become a problem again, even for the
Right.
Cephadm container deployments. So I kind of feel like we have to do something about it. Like this will eventually be a problem. I think we wanted CentOS 10 even for the umbrella release, ideally. So it's going
Yeah,
to
it's likely not to be CentOS specific, but it will be an EL10 distro most likely.
So yeah, I don't know. I kind of feel like we have to work on it. Like I don't know what the best solution is right now. Obviously, removing case events if nobody wants it would be the easiest one, but it's hard to say. But like Sunta, I don't want to spend the entire meeting on this one either. It's kind of a complex technical topic, but I think generally, I think we kind of have to work on it. Is my opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, but yeah, we'll move on for now. Just to not spend too much time on that one. So go to this next one. This one I don't know as much about what John was planning to say about this one, so I'm just going to immediately end it up.
Sure, it's sort of inspired by the previous, but in particular, I'm 90% sure we're stuck on a pretty old version of MyPy, and I cannot run unit tests with Python 3.13 or above. So what I would kind of like to do is kind of have a forcing function of like making sure all of our tooling at least works on the current latest versions of supported upstream Python. Make sure that we're using fairly recent, doesn't have to be bleeding edge, but fairly recent versions of tools like MyPy, PyTest, Flake 8, things like that. I think we have a lot of pin dependencies, and I think we ought to go through them and kind of audit them a bit. So that's kind of my summary here. It doesn't have to be a all at once, but I think it's something that we should all try to spend a little time on here and there. I know I'm pretty sure that updating to 3.13 will be some bit of an effort because I think what breaks is that silly mock file system library. But I've been stuck basically testing by forcing my 3.10 locally. Not everything breaks. Some of the PyTests run, but I think Cephadm in particular breaks with anything newer than 3.10 or 3.11.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like a no-brainer. We want to do it. It's just a matter of defining a process by which we can do it regularly,
Right.
and the fact that like we're not breaking things by just being on the newest one and having randomly make check breaks because the builders have a newer version of MyPy or something, and still updating it regularly enough that we don't fall too far behind. I also don't know how that interacts with the fact that we're using an older Python version still in the actual like container builds we're doing. because I think CentOS 9 what 3.9. It's right
Yeah,
now.
so we certainly want to support a range where we're supporting what's available on at least the oldest Ubuntu and oldest relish version. But right now, I cannot use the new versions on all attempts, period.
All right. I wonder if you almost want to just add in like a test for typically just somehow runs with Python version, whatever's in our container image, and just try to like have like almost an optional one we can have locally for whatever the newer thing is. So at least we can check in on the current status of it without breaking all of the checks.
Right.
Maybe something like that. That may be a good thing to add. Just at least then you can do some local testing, see what the current status is, work on it a bit, and you don't have to worry about like we have it unpinned, it'll break the upstream thing, whatever. You guys have to keep checking that it keeps working with the old version, which is kind of painful, but
yeah, I'm not advocating unpinning things. I'm just advocating going through the pins and making sure they are all like, maybe stuff from 2019, 2020 isn't too old. And, we need to at least make sure that the stuff we have is working. I know it's a bit of a value judgment is it too old? The tests pass, but like I said, when I have to stop and can't use the packaged Python on my distro, the default one, and have to jump through hoops, it's like, okay, I'm sure I'm not the only one who has to jump through hoops.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe this is just trying to implement a process by which we do this. Maybe that's just the most important.
That's exactly what this is all about. Whether it's like carve it up into like 5 to 10 trackers or what. I just want to,
I'm almost wondering if I should make it like a required regular weekly topic or something. Like we have to look at these every some number of time. I guess we have to still remember to do that, but I don't know. I think we have to think about it process wise. Again, I think it's maybe another topic we can't totally do in this meeting, but I definitely think it's again something we should do. It's just a matter of what is the cleanest way to do this.
Yeah, when I wrote these, none of these were like they're discussion topics. They're not like designs where I'm like, I'm going to go implement X.
All right. Like I said, I think I'm going to try to add it as like a regular weekly topic for a bit and see if we can sort of check on status for that. At least get it to a you said 2020. That's pretty far back at this point.
That was a joke. Yeah, that was my example. 2020, 2019 was like stuff that's probably too old, assuming it's had releases regularly since then. It's entirely possible some libraries are stable enough that we don't need to do that, but I use MyPy and PyTest as examples. I know we're pinning older versions because things broke when people tried to use the newer ones. And now we're stuck on these older versions for now.
Maybe start with some smaller stuff to get to the easier ones, just like on our own. And then once we feel like we're in a good spot for that, we can start doing some more difficult work. Imagine coordinate with some other teams as well. I imagine there's some other manager modules that are complaining than the ones we generally look at.
Yeah. Maybe next time I'll bring up my Python SIG idea again.
All right. Yeah, as we'll go on from that. I think I'll add it toward the weekly. I think we talk about that more like in depth. So we'll go to the next one here.
All right. So sorry for dominating the thing. I feel like I got to the pad first. I think we should have randomized the topics.
Yeah, should have just put like Redo's ones in here in the middle. Maybe I'll just jump down to one of his after this and come back up.
Sure. So Ceph command line tool. I remember there was a PR a couple months ago where someone was trying to make some changes. I kind of have some things I would like to improve in the command line. In particular, there was a downstream issue where I wanted to change something, and I'm like, this code is so... I don't know. I don't want to be too mean. Messy? Messy is probably a nice way to say it. I don't know what team it properly falls under. I have a feeling it kind of doesn't fall under any team in Ceph right now. It certainly does not follow any Python best practices that I've seen. I think it was probably one of the first bits of Python added to Ceph. I'm not saying Ort should take ownership of it, but I am, again, this is a food for thought thing. If we were to say move parts of it under Python Common, package the library code like a normal library rather than this chunk that lives off in its own special area, I think we could get it into a better, more maintained state and be able to improve it a bit over time. Again, this is all speculation stuff, but it was on my mind when I read these notes.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird spot ownership wise, because even the Ceph manager core has gone without ownership for some time. I know recently there's been some work to build a team for that, but it's kind of in the border of, I guess, the orchestration team would do and what that team would do. I mean, the whole point of it, I guess, is to interact between those two layers. So mostly you kind of want both teams to somehow be involved in that. Granted, I think there are people on that team, Dork and the manager, who do know Python, so maybe they could actually take it up.
I'm assuming this team you're talking about is a downstream thing.
Yeah, I know it's being led by Yarit. That's pretty much all I know about it.
Okay.
I don't know if they're working on stuff only for downstream. I assume it's also upstream related stuff. I don't see why not. But yeah, maybe I even just reach out and ask if they're doing anything there.
I also thought it was an upstream team, but maybe I'm also mistaken here.
It might have been an official upstream team, and Yarit's already the lead of other components, like the telemetry stuff, I'm pretty sure. So maybe it's not officially written anywhere, but I think I'd heard that she was trying to look into that area.
Yeah.
Maybe I could ask her if she has any thoughts on that, and then we could see if we could organize some sort of ownership over that file. Because I know you're talking about the Ceph argbar stuff, where it's a bit messy.
Yeah, and I don't want to sound like I'm patting myself on the back too much, but I also feel like the team. I think the strongest Python knowledge in Ceph is within the orchestration and somewhat into the dashboard team, but those two put together is probably the strongest Python knowledge.
Yeah. So I'm going to start it again. This is more of an organization thing, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it now. But yeah, maybe I'll try reaching out to Yarita, asking if her or whoever he's working with, if they are interested in looking at that. If not, maybe start doing maybe just refactoring, not even just actual changes, just a cleanup process over that. I make it easier to do more work on it later. But yeah, it's definitely an area that needs some attention. I think it's been a bit too long since somebody owned that, I feel like.
Good. I'm glad we're in agreement on that. All right. So why don't you skip to someone else's topic for a bit before you come back to one?
We'll do Redo's first two topics and then go back up and do.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. So the next change we have here is any change on the specs and triggering search reconfig. So this is part for people. This is just been upstream. It hasn't even come out in a release yet. I think Tentacle's first one's going to have some of this, but I don't know how much of it. Redwan's been working on a lot of stuff around certificate management, and this is part of that effort to do some more automation around how you can provide certificates and how you can do the rotation of certificates. So I'll let Redwan go on from there.
Well, I think this one is the third one in the list. The first one, detecting change on the spec and trigger service reconfig, is mainly the problem that we have had in the past, like somebody changing something in the spec, running Ceph org, apply the spec, and then expecting that this change will take effect immediately, and then realizing out that it was not applied, and you have to run Ceph org reconfig the service in order to apply the change. So this behavior, in my opinion, is kind of misleading, because when you apply a spec as the end user, you expect that those changes will take effect immediately. And that's not the case right now. So we have had this, for example, happening with RGW certificates. At least I've worked on some requests related to that in the past. But this will happen with any similar change that the user modify the spec and the change doesn't take effect. So I was thinking on adding some more generic mechanism to detect that when spec has changed, and then um, just go and reconfigure the service automatically without like asking or needing the user to do that manually. I think that will be more user friendly, but at the same time, you have to be careful because like maybe this could trigger new actions that were not happening in the past, and this might bite some users.
Yeah, there's always been sort of a tricky topic. And I think why we've sort of just allowed it to be something users generally have to do, unless it's like a required reconfig situation, is that it is sort of hard to tell exactly which cases we should. Because there are definitely cases where we shouldn't. Like for example, if like you just changed the placement, I don't generally need to reconfigure a bunch of other daemons because you did that. And the fact that I'm doing that might just mean that suddenly a bunch of OSCs have to restart for no reason. So that's why I think we've generally held off. I thought about in the past of some idea of like when I change a spec file of letting the user tell me whether I want to reconfigure everything or not, like having some sort of flag as like an option to get around it. There's definitely some more we could do. Like there are certain cases where we should that we aren't, but it's not. It definitely is a pretty difficult problem to tell exactly when you should and shouldn't. It's because it changes so much by each service type and everything. It's really hard to do in a generic fashion like this.
Yeah.
What you just said makes me want to chime in with the whole, you've talked to me before, so you know I'm going to probably mention how we have all these service classes, and that decision should not be in a central place, but the decision logic should be part of those services. So each service can decide, has this changed me significantly enough to trigger something automated? I love the idea of doing the automation, but you're right that every service is different, and so I think that should belong with the service logic. That each class thing should treat handler.
Yeah, related to that, we do have the dependencies mechanism, which what
Right.
we are using right now. But I find it like kind of manual crafted art that we have to put in that list. What's things, and in general, the dependencies are mostly like with other services, so they are not directly with spec or fields of the spec, even though we end up using them in practice. But yeah, it give me good idea, John, with like having some logic inside the services to see or to decide if like my spec has changes, just go and reconfigure automatically, because we do have this separation at
Yeah.
services level, so we can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, we should. It would make total sense if there was like helper methods to say like compare the fields of these two objects and tell me what's different. And then based on that, I could have custom logic that's like, okay, those fields, I'm not going to reconfigure on those changes, but those other ones, yes, that kind of.
Yeah. I think in general, like the spec is like the source of truth of um, services. So in
Yep.
general, when we change something there, is because we are trying to modify something with the service, placement, behavior,
Yep.
whatever. So I I'm I'm having a hard time to find like use case where you change the spec, but that's okay, and you won't change anything with the service.
Right.
Well, there are certain like spec fields, for example, that'll just cause us to like run certain config commands that like the daemons pick up on their own. They don't need to be restarted or anything like that. Like that's an example of one of those. And we do that for RGW and for a couple of fields. I did kind of like the idea, Johnson, that we should have it do per service. I'm almost wondering if we should almost have like an option for like a service spec where I can list off like a set of fields where if those fields change, you just know immediately that something has to be retriggered. Because that can be done in maybe a more structured way in our current dependency system, which is more just checking all sorts of things. And we still need that system. There are going to be some cases that you can't do super easily, but it might be that, like, say if we know, because Redon's working on like these SSL key things, like maybe you just say, like almost all the spec fields, if like that particular field changes, and we know that one's there, I don't need to make that part of the dependencies. That's just a spec change that matters. And so we're going to mark it as
Right.
maybe just like a list
And
of which
some
fields that is could be useful.
Yeah, and something you said earlier tickled something in the back of my head. I know we had talked. I think there's even a PR for like sending a signal instead of like restarting a service. So there could be different tiers of what you want to do when you see like some fields have changed. So I'm just throwing this out, but like if there was like an enum or something that said what to do, like you want to do a full restart, do you want to reconfigure the world, or do you want to just poke a container inside of the service? So there could be different tiers of what to do when something has changed.
Yeah, I think even that plugin you're talking about was added for a specific Ganesha use case where if something changed, we wanted to just send it a SIG up instead of restarting it. So it's basically exactly what you were describing already. So yeah, that would definitely fit into the system.
Yeah, sometimes in order to try to avoid interruptions in the service, you just want to see gap the process instead of restarting it, so you lose all the sockets communications and all the clients get steered down. Yeah, I think like this is was basically to start the discussion to see if worth it or not. Then maybe follow up and see how can we proceed if we end up deciding that we should obviously.
Yeah, but if I can just generically saying like if a spec changes, do it for stuff like I talked about before, like things that are just placement changes or things we're just setting config options for the user, not the replug daemons. But I think we could definitely have a more generic system than we do right now. At least something we don't have to write out like a whole extra function checking certain dependencies and things. Because a lot of these things are just like we know these fields are for sure. You have to redeploy the daemon if you change these. So there should probably we should have some mechanism for marking that so that we can have like an easier way of doing it and tracking it. But again, I might be difficult to do it in a very generic way, the way that you're sort of proposing. I haven't looked at this pull request yet, to be honest. I don't know for sure what your...
Yeah, right now it's very dumb. Pull request, it just introduced some mechanism to detect changes on the spec YAML file itself. Since we have these new dependencies, also logic, so it makes it easier to propagate that. But we may need to introduce something per service to decide whether changing the spec will produce reconfiguration or not.
Yeah. And I think the reason I initially, when I introduced this topic, talked about the specs, that's what immediately came to mind for me, is that the one that we're missing for, I think, a bunch of different things, that is a very obvious, you should do this case, where if the spec changes, we probably should be always reconfiguring the daemon. It kind of needs a new certificate most of the time. I think that maybe the of RGW, I think it might look into a config option to grab it, but I think all the other daemons, we're just mounting them into the container and just using them directly. So
yeah.
All right. So yeah, I think another thing we probably have to do some refactoring around the service specs and maybe have some way of a new mechanism basically for specifying like in a simple way, like fields that should re-trigger this. And maybe we can have some like global ones. Like I know you've been renaming some of the things, Redwan, to like SSL cert, SSL key. Maybe that's even the generic service class. Say you have this field and this one changes, we know exactly what happened.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Yeah, we'll look into that a bit. I think it's something we should do. It's worth looking into for sure.
Yeah.
We'll also do this next one under here, Redwan. If you want to talk about this Cephadm secrets handling, I think this is more in line of what I originally introed your stuff as.
Yeah, this one is more generic since we manage different services and each one of them may have some secrets that we don't want to put directly into the specs and we want to put in some safe locations. So far, we've been storing this kind of elements in the Mon key store. But we don't have like simple way to reference secrets from the specs. With Cert Manager, we have introduced it for certificates and keys, but we might have like passwords, users, and similar secrets that you don't want to reference directly from the spec. Especially, sometimes we do log the specs in some logs, which could be could lead to security issues. So just like some generic idea to discuss and think how can we do that.
Well, one nice thing about the Cert Manager, at least, is that at least from what I've seen, your are offering different options on how they can specify where the certificate is supposed to be from. So right now, I believe it's just like ones we generate or ones they give us, but I feel like that mechanism already gives us sort of like an entryway into how we can sort of add some of these other integrations in. Like we just simply add in, instead of a Cephadm generated one, you say like this is a HashiCorp cert, and you have to give us some other information in order to grab it, I imagine. But maybe that instrument existing already gives us a good mechanism to integrate that in.
Yeah, in this first implementation of the cert manager, I introduced the references, and by now, like we are not allowed, or the user not allowed to specify the path of the URL to the reference, but nothing impedes us in the future to have that. We can reference the cert manager, Cephadm cert manager, or we can have a reference to external vault. And in that case, we have to have some logic that goes and bring the secret from this external vault to be consumed by the Cephadm. Yeah. So infrastructure kind of there. So we have to see how can we extend it and integrate it with other existing mechanism for storage like vault or and similar items.
Yeah, like my mind is almost just a continuation of the work you've already been doing. I've already sort of making the certificate stuff a bit more generic. It's just now we want to add a few more backends after that. I just sort of had to like pick one and then see if we can integrate with it. Like just be some point of these projects to look into one of these things and see if see how well it works.
Yeah.
All right. I guess we're good for that one. Is there something else we're going to say right on?
I think we can jump to another section, maybe the scaling or some item.
Yeah, we'll do that. Oh, you can see this one down here. This one's new. But we'll do this one first. This was the one thing I added in here, and that I've been working on recently, which is some sort of scalability improvements around Cephadm. So we've been testing in sort of our downstream stuff, large scale deployments. And while we know like Ceph itself scales pretty well at fairly large scales, there are some problems on the orchestration side. For example, we saw some very slow deployment times, partially because our system of refreshing the host metadata for what daemons are there is a bit slow, and we do only 10 hosts at a time. So if you have enough hosts, suddenly that can take you 20 minutes, and our deployment slows down. And so we've done a few things in that regard. So I think we're almost certainly going to do these. I'm just kind of basically mentioning these are the things we're working on in that area. So for one, we're working on this deployment removal in parallel. There's a pull request up that implements a good chunk of this already. The idea being for a fresh deployment of a daemon, there's probably not too much benefit from staggering them, slowing them down, etc. With the exception of, I think we have some special casing around SMB because it needs to start up in a certain order. But beyond that, you probably want your 20 OSCs to start up faster. It usually doesn't help you to start them up slower. And same thing for removal. This is for pure removals. This isn't for like you're changing something on the daemon. This is for like I want them completely gone. So in those cases as well, we probably make it a bit faster. So we worked on that quite a bit. I've also thrown in something about this upgrade here. So upgrade's a bit of a different case because unlike what I said before, where you probably always want to be able to deploy or remove a bit faster, you don't always want to be able to upgrade faster. Which is why I add this extra note here about these OK to stop checks. So we don't really integrate too much with it. I think we do for OSDs an upgrade, but there's some other daemon types that have these checks we don't always do. Partially because it's a bit more difficult. Like for example, if you have only one Grafana daemon down, you're never really going to be OK to stop the Grafana daemon because that'll always make sure the Grafana daemon is down. So that one's a bit more difficult, and we probably have to have special casing around that. But basically what I'd like to do as part of this is during the upgrade, we do as much parallelization as we can within the bounds of what we consider an OK to stop check. So we're trying to, I guess, be a bit faster without being too aggressive to the point where we cause some sort of outages or something in the middle of the upgrade. So this is something we're working on as well. And then I added this one in as well. It's a bit of a tangent, I guess, from that, but this is for support for multiple different registries. This is more, I guess, a extent to install thing, but I think it's also useful for people running these big clusters where you can specify multiple registries to pull images from, and Cephadm can log you into all of them instead of right now you can only do one, which limits you a little bit there. So we're also working on that. I think this is basically already done, actually, this part. And these are in progress. We have a pull request upstream, but we are trying to get these in for the umbrella release. We want to get it in to main, hopefully on the early side, so that it has a lot of time to sit there, because they are actually pretty massive changes to a lot of the core parts of Cephadm in order to do this. But the work is in progress, and we're planning to do that. So I don't know if anybody has any other comments on that one, but I wanted to mention that is something that we're working on for umbrella.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we have somebody from the core team in the call. I don't see anybody from core, I think, as far as I can tell. But we need their guidance maybe for this OK to stop, to try to see how can we invest in this API and we can move fast but safe during the
I kind of
upgrade.
forgot about this part, but yeah, this one we discovered recently, which is that we have an issue. I guess it was a bug in the upgrade code where we run these OK to stop checks for our OSDs. We provide it with a max of 16, but we don't have a way, as far as we know, to specify, like I say, only pick out of this subset of them or exclude these ones, which means that most of the time it'll, after the first batch of 16 of them, it'll give us back like one. Well, basically, you give it at least the OCD we were looking at directly. So you'll get that one back, and then you'll get you like 15 of them that are already upgraded, in which case we just end up upgrading the one new one and nothing else. And so our parallelization, even in the OK to stop portion, is actually not very good right now. But it's a bit difficult for us to do much about that on the Cephadm side. So we may try to coordinate with someone from the core team or something, see if we can add some extra parameters to that command, so that we can say, I want OK to stop OSDs, but only out of this pool of them, instead of just give me any 16 of them, basically. So we're probably gonna have to do that too in order to get this to work as cleanly as we'd like. Because right now, even if I could do it all in parallel, if I only get one that's OK to stop all the time, it doesn't really do anything. So we're gonna be looking into that too. All right. Anything else on that topic? All right. Well, I'll keep going. I don't actually know who added this one in. Does anybody want to talk about integration of central config with revision control?
That would be Anthony Diatri. I recognize his initials at the end.
Yes, that was me. Somebody, I forget who suggested that I join this session to
I did
discuss this. I thought so. Yeah, this has been on my mind for years, actually. Ever since I think with Mimic, when central config came in. Enterprises like to have everything in revision control. I'm sure I don't have to justify revision control to this audience. And I love the central config, having had to do injection and mess with Ceph.conf across entire cluster. Love the central config. I've struggled trying to integrate the two, so that I see people having to manually go and audit their central configs and type commands manually at a command line, which doesn't scale, and it's not great for consistency. And so I'm wondering if there's been any thought about a way to integrate the two, and I'm wide open there on how that might be. I just wanted to raise the discussion topic, so that, for example, somebody might have a Git repository into a PR and have that result in diffing the central config and applying something idempotently, just speculating.
Yeah, I personally think that's a great idea. I've thought about it on and off as well. Before working primarily on Ceph, I spent a lot of time with Kubernetes and OpenShift, and they have a lot more in this space with things like Argo CD. I always forget the other one's name. Where basically you're doing stuff like, I've got a Git repository. If I merge the PR to main, I automatically apply those changes into Kubernetes cluster XYZ. Ceph's
because everything is in with Rook, everything is in a YAML file. So that's very natural there. With the central config being for most people kind of CLI oriented, that makes it a little more complicated, I think.
Yeah, I can imagine like we could build some low level tools into Ceph where you could do something like diff config, diff this YAML against what's in the mon store, diff these keys against what's in the current store, and then around that you could build some sort of like one of my favorite words, like a sidecar that would periodically pull the Git repo and do the comparison for you, kind of thing.
Even if there's a CLI to do it, so that
right,
you can control when that happens. When I was formulating this, one thing that I wondered was, okay, if I do ceph config set something that just specifies an existing value, does it show up in the config history? Because I didn't want to, if it took the approach of just unilaterally blasting and relying on idempotence, I didn't want to DOS the config history. And it looks like the config history does not have an item if I do a config set that doesn't actually change, which is good. Because we've seen where currently the config history grows unbounded, and and I know there's a PR in there for that, to trim that. And then especially with the OSD memory target auto tuner, those have a way of dominating the config history. So last thing I would want to do is DOS the config history more. But even if something uses the API to apply a set of things idempotently, because diffing is like more work, right? Just an idea. What I'm after is a way to infrastructure as code, instead of and having somebody to manually apply the same command line across multiple clusters.
Yeah, right
personally,
now,
I think. Go ahead, Fred. Sorry, we both
yeah,
talked.
I take it. Yeah, I think we have now like the configuration split between mostly the configuration, the Ceph config, stored in the mon store, and the Cephadm specs. I'm not sure to what point you can bootstrap and configure a cluster using only specs without issuing any self config blah 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 to adjust the configuration. I'm not sure because I know we do have sections, config sections in the specs where you can put values, but not sure like if you can put that in any order or you have first to set the spec, apply it, and then you can change the configuration later. But previously, as you say, this is not something that you can track easily or something that you can automate by like submitting configuration changes to some system and then have automatically these changes applied to your cluster. So we do have some infrastructure, but I think it's kind of far away from a point where you can totally automate the deployment.
Yep. Just to be clear, I'm not even thinking about the service specs. I'm just thinking of for a cluster that's already deployed, about it's like, oh, if I want to change max backfills or something, ongoing lifecycle changes after the cluster is already deployed.
Yeah.
I think this is a great topic. I think it'll have to be something that's more like ongoing, because it's kind of a big sprawling thing. Not that we haven't discussed sprawling things in this session already. But yeah, I think we need to have a continuing conversation, because I also was thinking more on the service spec side. Now I understand more what configuration you mean. So
yeah, just central.
Yeah,
yeah.
It's. I can envision ways to do it, and we'll probably need to have more conversations just to kind of narrow down.
Yeah, I'm happy to
possible.
happy to see any work there. You folks are the developers, so I'm happy to for any feedback that you can give me.
Yeah, I mean, that was a really cool idea. I'm not sure how much we can do on it exactly from the orchestration side, but given the existence of that like assimilate conf command and the existence of a config history, I would think this could be done. I don't know how difficult it would be, but I would think it'd be possible.
Yeah, I thought about specs because the kind of configuration we manage mainly from Cephadm, because the Ceph config is not owned by Cephadm team directly. But at the end of the day, it's also part of the configuration we use and we consume.
It was advised to me to join this group. If there's somewhere else that's better suited, I'm all good with that. Just let me know, what team would be, if any, would be better to pick this up
appropriate.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would
What's
be
your
interested
job?
in what the
Who's
Credo
our
team think of this. I think they would probably be the people to go to. I think we're probably thinking more in specs. We're thinking the orchestration side, which also would be so nice to have maybe on our side. But
You dropped out a little there. I think you mentioned a team, but I didn't.
So the Rados team /
Rados team. Okay.
I think they manage. This is probably like a core monitor thing.
Yeah.
I think they generally are going to handle that. So the existence of assimilate conf and the config history makes me think that this ought to be possible. I don't know if they've considered it before, but I would definitely be interested in their opinions on this one because it sounds like a really cool feature to have.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. What do we have? We have about 10 minutes here. So we'll go back up to a couple of these ones and we'll go back to red ones at the end, I guess. So we'll start with this. I don't know if there's so much to say about multi-arch images. It's something we wanted to do. We already sort of said we wanted to do for technical. We just kind of didn't get to it. I think it's still desirable, especially for anybody who wants to deploy on some strange sort of like Frankenstein hardware cluster. We just didn't get to it. But anyone who doesn't understand this, is you have like an ARM machine and like an x86 machine in the same cluster. What will happen is when Cephadm tries to figure out what image to deploy with, it will go to the host with the active manager. It will pull the image on that host. And if, say, that's an x86 machine, when it then goes to deploy on an ARM machine, it'll still use that image. And so that image won't work. So in order to support that sort of setup, we wanted to be able to let people have multi-arch images, essentially just be able to track this ourselves and sort of handle it for you so you don't have to worry about it. But we kind of didn't get to it for technical. But I think it's still a desirable thing for Umbrella if you can find the time to work on it.
Yep, and that's the only reason I put that on there, so we can move on to the next one.
All right. Container engine login. I haven't actually looked at this tracker yet.
Yeah, so I was in Slack, and Dan Mick was complaining about stuff, and it turns out he had also filed a tracker, and I wasn't sure what, if anything, the system. I know we can already do some of this. I'm just not quite sure what, in addition to what the system already does, he's asking for. But I thought it was interesting, so I thought it was worth raising here. Because, and it actually kind of dovetails a little bit with one of your other bullets, which was something like multiple registry logins. So just having the system maybe help manage the registry logins a little bit more in a sophisticated way would help some clusters, is kind of my point.
All right. I don't know if this is a case of there's an issue, because we do have a manager module command that is supposed to do, I feel like, exactly what it's describing. Which is, it's not much Orch, which is why I'm wondering if it doesn't know it exists, because it's called
exactly.
There's Cephadm registry login if you run it through the binary, which that logs into whatever host you run it on, and there's if from the I'm connecting the monitor Cephadm registry login, and you write the same credentials there, and it'll go to all the hosts. So again, I'm not sure.
Okay, that was one of my questions. Is it automated in a way that it does it throughout the whole?
We have a whole thing that's supposed to check, kind of like all the other refreshes. It's supposed to check like, has this host got a registry login? No, let me go do that. Now, I think I've seen some issues with this in the past where the host ended up logged out. So there's maybe some bugs around it, but the feature does exist. It just has a weird name because it's put under Cephadm instead of Ceph-Orch, like all the other commands.
Right. We've had that discussion a couple of times. When do things fall under one versus the other? And you know, Orch is supposed to be kind of universal. Even though I know the Rook folks don't use it as much in theory, it can be compatible. So something to come back to. Maybe if you want to, you can reply to this tracker and kind of figure out what Dan was thinking.
All right. Yeah, I can just ask on there. But I think this feature exists. It's just there might be some issues with it or something. Or maybe it doesn't know it exists, actually. It's one of the two, I think.
Yeah, I was going through tracker issues while I was making the notes in my section. So that's where that came from.
All right. Next,
and I'll just jump quickly.
Just
I
go
got
ahead.
two SMBs. If you don't mind, I'll just finish off those two small things.
Sure.
All right. So real quick, SMB side of orchestration. I have plans to add support for these things called offline domain join tokens. They would avoid you from having to give the manager your password. I think it's also interesting how this would mesh with the vault and secrets stuff, but currently SMB stuff and the secret stuff need to meet at some point. They're kind of independent at the moment. The only other interesting thing is we added some gRPC interface so that clouds can directly manage SMB connections. And now I'm thinking, now that I have this hammer, everything else is starting to look like a nail, and we can extend this interface so that people can have more direct control over their SMB clusters without having to route everything through the manager. And the other thought I had while I was working on this is we did a gRPC at the request of one particular cloud, but if other folks are looking for things other than gRPC, I'd be happy to hear about that.
Is this a protocol, standard protocol, John? The one for the remote control. Is this a standard protocol?
No, I defined the protocol. It's
okay.
If you need the link, I can send you the link to the .proto file. It's specific to SMB needs, so it's not standard.
Okay, I was just wondering if it's standard.
It could be someday.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, I don't have too much to say on that, but it sounds like there's some cool SMB stuff coming. So John's working on that, I guess. That's what's coming from Umbrella. And I guess that can us down to our last couple. I think it's our red ones, last two topics. We're going to talk about the Acme rotation stuff here.
Well, the Acme rotation is natural extension of the effort they have already started with the search manager. So now we are providing a new tool to manage certificates and keys and provide nice, hopefully nice user interface for certificate management. But we are not yet there where the users can automate the whole certificate and keys rotation of their cluster by using some standard or protocol like Acme. So I think we have the infrastructure, and Acme extension kind of natural step to go with. So maybe something to consider for the short term to include in Cephadm. And the last one, the management gateway. This is more, at least in my opinion, more difficult to solve problem because the introduction of the management gateway, we deploy the management gateway, users should start using the IP or the FQDN of the management gateway instead of the one of the dashboard. However, this Ceph manager services, which is to be the command normally users run to see where the dashboard and Prometheus are listening, is still reporting the dashboard IP and port instead of management gateway. And that's not easy to solve because internally these URLs are coming from a method in the manager model, which gives every model like Cephadm, dashboard, or Prometheus a way to set up a URL, and it gives only one URL. So in this case, the dashboard is just setting the IP, and the dashboard by design has no notion of the management gateway or where it is listening, at least directly. Indirectly, the dashboard can have access to some variables, but that's something that we have to think of on how should we proceed there. And I think in general, like Ceph manager services, maybe should be something that Cephadm should implement, because at the end of the day, we do have the Ceph Arch LS, where we show information related to the services also. So this is like kind of similar commands, but the output is different. So something that to think of, see how can we merge these commands in one, or uh, fix the output of this command.
Yeah, because that manager service right now is always just a JSON thing of listing the manager module names to like IPs or something, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we definitely could do that on our side. I mean, there's maybe even some other things besides management gateway that could be nice just to see in there. Maybe some of your other gateway daemons, like the more core ones. There's probably a lot of nice.
We do have the Ceph Arch LS, but right now we just like show information about the number of demons, the how many of them are up or down. We don't show information related to virtual IPs of the service, for example, or IPs in general. Ports.
Yeah. So I think that's probably a good idea. I think we should actually just have our own version of this. Because I mean, if we're just fixing or changing this, that would be again something to put it outside of orchestration. But definitely seems like a good idea to have an equivalent if we have enough things with port IP combinations where if somebody might want to see them all, we could list them out for them. We can even add some extra filtering and stuff. Like you said, the Orch LS it gives you information, but it's a bit too broad right now. You have to really sort through it to find that stuff. So definitely that's an improvement there. Yeah, so I like the idea actually. I think we should actually just make our own. It would be nice also, I guess we could change this one, but I think we should probably just focus on having our own.
Yeah.
Because on top of just whatever is in there, we could have a bunch of our other Cephadm specific stuff.
Yeah, and fixing that one actually is not easy, because it depends on the manager, core manager, which is not a place where you can introduce changes easily in general. So going with our own implementation, which gives more extended information about the services we manage, status, virtual IPs, ports, I think would be useful for the end user.
Yeah, I see no reason to push back on that. I like the idea.
Okay. And that's all from my side, I think. Thank you.
All right. I do see we are at the top of the hour, so which I think we're supposed to end. Does anybody have any other last minute things you want to add here? I think we got through all the topics in this, just barely actually. So, all right, doesn't sound like it. I guess we're good. So, thanks everybody for joining, and I guess that's it. See y'all later.